Hey, welcome to Sleep Crime Stories. Before we begin, let me ask, where are you watching from, and what time is it there? A quick comment and a subscribe go a long way, it really helps. Now, turn down the lights, and let's begin tonight's case. This place never seems to take a break, with something exciting happening every hour of the day and night. Among its residents was Shauna Ann Castleton, who moved here from Salt Lake City at the age of 28. She started out selling cosmetics at Saks Fifth Avenue and Neiman Marcus, but was soon drawn to the city's glitz and glamour. Shauna transitioned to working as a cocktail waitress at the Fiesta, then landed a prestigious role at the Palms Hotel Casino, one of the most famous casinos in the area. She settled in quickly, making friends with her colleagues and winning the hearts of her customers. Her friends described her as a free spirit, always positive, and someone who lived in the moment. In 2002, Shauna met George Tiffay at the Palms. George was a regular there, and he was immediately drawn to Shauna's work ethic and enthusiasm. He had a strong background, having been a star athlete and homecoming king at school. After training at the United States Military Academy, he became a firefighter. The attraction between them was instant, and they quickly became inseparable. A year later, their world expanded when they welcomed a baby girl named Madison. George was fiercely protective of his new family, and Shauna adored her little girl. 2 years later, they celebrated their love with a beautiful beach wedding in Hawaii. However, their blissful life took a hit when George faced a severe financial setback during the housing market crash. Shauna became the family's primary breadwinner, which created financial stress and began to strain their relationship. Shauna confided in friends that George had become jealous and resentful. His behavior turned more controlling, causing further tension. He even made hurtful comments about her appearance in front of their little girl. Things took a bizarre turn when George befriended a homeless man who started doing odd jobs around their house. Shauna found this man unsettling. As the financial strain and George's behavior continued, Shauna moved out into her own townhouse apartment in Summerlin. They started sharing custody of Madison and even saw a marriage counselor, but it seemed divorce was looming. Shauna sent George a text that hinted at the finality of their separation, saying there might be no going back once they lived apart. George was also upset about the complications that divorce would bring. As they lived apart, Shauna tried to establish a new routine, continuing to work long hours because she loved her job. One fateful night, Shauna returned home from work to find her apartment broken into, with valuable items and her engagement ring stolen. One particularly odd detail was the disappearance of her bikini bottoms and the presence of unfamiliar boxer briefs. This incident left Shauna feeling frightened and on edge, but she tried her best to move on. One night, Shauna left work as usual, around 3 a.m., and drove home. She arrived around 3:30 a.m., parked outside, and entered through her garage door. George, who had just finished a long shift at the fire department, had picked up 8-year-old Madison from her grandmother's house. They both went to Shauna's place to collect some of Madison's belongings. What they discovered inside was a scene of complete chaos. Shauna Tiffay lay lifeless on the floor. It was evident from the bloodstains and Shauna's body's position that she had been attacked as she ascended the stairs. Her injuries indicated that a hammer was likely used as the murder weapon, and her last moments were filled with suffering. Her skull was crushed, and her fingers were broken as she tried to defend herself. There was a deep hole in the side of her head, which at first made paramedics believe she had been shot. A neighbor reported hearing a thudding sound from her apartment between 3:30 and 4 a.m. However, this wasn't unusual as she typically returned home around that time. Later, another neighbor found some of Shauna's belongings, like her phone, health card, and makeup, along the side of a nearby road. The police started by interviewing her estranged husband, George, who had been at the fire station for a 24-hour shift the day before. His alibi checked out, which left the police puzzled about where to begin their investigation. They weren't sure if the burglary that happened 3 weeks earlier was related, or just a terrifying coincidence. Since Shauna's belongings were discovered outside her home, it was possible that the same person returned, not realizing Shauna would be awake, and a tragic confrontation ensued. The police also didn't know if Shauna was randomly targeted, or if there was a specific reason behind the crime. These uncertainties left both Shauna's casino colleagues and her family worried. They all had similar work schedules, raising concerns that one of them might be the next target. Despite George's alibi, Paula, Shauna's sister, and her husband had their suspicions. They decided to call George to inquire about the situation. During this call, Paula expressed her concerns to George, believing he might be involved based on conversations with her sister. Paula and her husband subsequently booked a flight to Las Vegas, as their minds raced with questions and fears. Paula couldn't shake the haunting image of her sister's final moments, the excruciating pain she endured, the terror, and the realization that she was going to die. Within 24 hours of finding Shauna's body, the police received a crucial tip that would open up a new direction in the case. A man named Big Will claimed that a homeless friend he knew as Greyhound had admitted to killing a woman with a hammer. Greyhound seemed unperturbed, even cheerful, as if he had just accomplished a mission. Big Will told Greyhound that if he ever saw news of a woman killed in the manner Greyhound had described, he'd have to report him. As the news of Shauna's murder spread, Big Will believed Greyhound was telling the truth, and immediately informed the police. Greyhound, actually named Noelle Stevens, was living in a tent on the outskirts of the city and was known to the police for various low-level criminal activities, including theft and drug-related charges. Although he admitted to drug dealing, he vehemently denied any involvement in Shauna's death. The police found this surprising, as Noelle had no apparent motive for traveling so far to commit such a serious crime without any significant gains. To get to the bottom of this, the police began searching the area near Noelle's tent while he was in custody. The officers were concerned because the vastness of this place meant that the search for any potential evidence could take weeks. However, surprisingly, the evidence was not far from where it all began. Just a short walk from a tent, they discovered a pair of trousers belonging to Noelle, stained with blood. Nearby, there was a price tag from a hammer and a pair of bloody underwear. Back at the police station, detectives were diligently examining Noelle's phone records. It didn't take them long to stumble upon a crucial contact that would tie everything together. George. When asked about George, Noelle mentioned that he was his friend, the firefighter. Noelle Stevens was the man whom George TFA had befriended, the same man who had raised suspicions in Shauna's mind since their first meeting. The police used the barcode from to track down the store's CCTV footage, revealing a shocking revelation. The video clearly showed George TFA and Noelle Stevens shopping together, buying the very hammer that would later be used in Shauna's tragic fate. This discovery strongly pointed to George's involvement in the events that transpired. Back at the police station, they confronted Noelle with all the collected evidence, and he finally admitted to being Shauna's murderer. As suspected, Noelle claimed that it was George, Shauna's estranged husband, who had orchestrated this gruesome act, and he had paid Noelle $600 to carry it out on his behalf. Noelle went on to describe that he and George had spent considerable time planning the heinous act. George had obtained a key for Noelle, bought dark clothing for him, and even asked him to stage a robbery weeks prior to Shauna's death, almost like a practice run. On that fateful day, September 29th, Noelle broke into Shauna's house. He hid in her closet for a while, then moved to the living room, waiting for her. When Shauna began ascending the stairs, Noelle followed her and launched his brutal attack. During this horrific encounter, Shauna cried and begged for her life, repeatedly asking why this was happening. Noelle struck her 17 times with the hammer. When the hammerhead broke, he continued using it until Shauna stopped moving. After sharing this gruesome story, Noelle offered to lead detectives to where he had buried the hammerhead in the desert, finally providing them with the murder weapon. At this point, 9 days had passed since Shauna's lifeless body was discovered that early morning in September. On October 8th, detectives notified George's mother and sister that he was under investigation in connection with Shauna's death. Their immediate response was one of shock and denial. But just minutes later, George received a phone call from his sister, which set off a chain of events. He swiftly jumped into his truck and engaged in a reckless and high-speed drive through Vegas, culminating in a deliberate crash into a concrete wall. Remarkably, George survived the crash thanks to his seatbelt, and he was subsequently treated for his injuries at the University Medical Center. 2 days later, officers arrived at George's hospital bed to inform him of his arrest. George's response was simply, "Okay," after which he requested to contact his attorney, take a shower, and brush his teeth. The authorities believed they had amassed a substantial amount of evidence to bring charges against both men. Just 3 months later, Noel Stevens entered a guilty plea, which resulted in the death penalty being removed from the table in exchange for his testimony as the prosecution's star witness. He was sentenced to 42 years to life in prison. In August 2015, George, who continued to maintain his innocence, entered the courtroom for his trial. The prosecution painted a grim picture, explaining how he had hidden in the bathroom area and ambushed Shauna when she returned home from her work at the Palms, striking her multiple times with a hammer, which ultimately claimed her life. Throughout the trial, Shauna's family stood by, wearing her favorite color, pink, and presenting a poker chip, her lucky charm, to prosecutor Mark DiGiacomo. George chose not to testify, but an array of witnesses, including his sisters and close friends, attested to the kind, compassionate, and hardworking man they believed they knew, a man who would have no part in such a heinous crime. The prosecution's case was robust. Alongside the CCTV footage and Noel's confessions, they had a multitude of phone records showing the numerous times George had called Noel, 87 times in September 2012, and 5 times the night before the murder, a remarkable frequency for someone who supposedly only occasionally hired Noel for odd jobs around the house. However, the defense argued that the CCTV evidence was inconclusive, as they were simply buying tools for household chores. The star witness, Noel, took the stand, reiterating the same detailed account of the events he had shared with the police several years earlier. George and Shauna had their fair share of arguments, mostly about money. It's no secret that their marriage was on the rocks, and that led to some discussions about separating. George talked to someone about killing Shauna, but initially this person didn't take him seriously. They thought he was just talking big, letting off some steam. But something changed in that conversation, something that made them reconsider. George supposedly offered this person money to carry out the act. At first it was $1,000, but it later went up to $5,000. The plan was for George to pay after an insurance payout, and he also intended to make money from pawning Shauna's engagement ring. Now, this person has a significant role in the events. They used a hammer from a store called Lowe's as the weapon to attack Shauna. George had suggested using a wooden hammer, fearing that a metal one might break during the attack. They bought the hammer earlier and kept it until the day of the crime. The attack was brutal. This person, wearing a mask, confronted Shauna with the hammer. She asked why this was happening, but they didn't respond. Instead, they struck her with the hammer, causing her to fall. They continued hitting her, even when the wooden hammer broke, and then switched to a metal piece. The prosecution claimed that this person's story matched with evidence like CCTV footage and phone records. However, during cross-examination, they admitted to having hallucinations, which the defense used to suggest that they might have fabricated the story. George's attorney argued that this story was just a tale, not supported by strong evidence. They maintained that George had no motive to kill Shauna. The prosecution countered this by saying that George might have intended to eliminate this person too, which is why he had bought a gun recently. Now, as the jury deliberated for 3 days, the tension was palpable. Nobody could predict how this case would end. The verdict was delivered in a Clark County, Nevada courtroom, after 5 days of testimony and about 3 hours of closing arguments. The jury, consisting of 7 men and 5 women, took 15 hours to reach their decision. The jury found George Tiefer guilty on several counts, including conspiracy to commit a serious crime. The charges were related to a horrifying incident involving his wife. When asked if this was their final verdict, the jury responded in unison, yes. Following the guilty verdict, George Tiefer showed no emotion as the jury deliberated his punishment. The jury had 3 options for sentencing: life without the possibility of parole, 20 years to life, or 20 to 50 years. After only 4 hours of deliberation, they decided to impose a life sentence without the possibility of parole. In addition, George Tiefer received an additional 81 years for his convictions on charges of conspiracy, burglary, and robbery. The judge stated that this sentencing was based on the evil of the crime. Shauna's sister, Paula, expressed her satisfaction with the verdict, describing George as a controlling manipulator. She felt that the best outcome was for him to spend his life in prison, unable to control anything. She thanked the Clark County District Attorney's Office and everyone involved in the case. The family had been fighting for justice for Shauna for nearly 3 years, and they were relieved that justice had finally been served. George Tiefer, however, decided to appeal the verdict. In his 107-page appeal, he included handwritten notes claiming that prescription medications altered his mind, making him believe he needed to commit a crime to protect his child. An online fundraiser was initiated to support his appeal, but ultimately, his conviction was upheld. Shauna's family founded Justice for Shauna, a group aimed at raising awareness about domestic violence and abusive relationships. They also moved Shauna's grave from Las Vegas back to her home state of Utah, where she could rest beside her father. Shauna's daughter, Maddie, now lives with her grandmother and spends time with her Aunt Paula. Despite the profound loss, Maddie remembers her mother with a smile, recalling the laughter and joy they shared. This heartbreaking case highlights the devastating consequences of domestic violence and the resilience of Shauna's family in seeking justice and raising awareness about such issues. It serves as a reminder of the importance of supporting victims and taking action against abuse. Now we are going to delve into a case from Minnesota, dating back to 2013. It revolves around a woman named Kira Steger, who, at the age of 30, worked as a store clerk in a clothing shop located within the Mall of America. She was truly dedicated to her job, never missing a shift. So when February 23, 2013 rolled around and she failed to show up for work, her coworkers became understandably concerned. They attempted to reach out to Kira, but she didn't respond to their calls or text messages. As a result, they contacted the police, reporting her as missing. Kira K. Steger was born on November 19, 1982, in Des Plaines, Illinois. She was the cherished daughter of Marcy and Jai Steger, who described her as a lively, dedicated, and sweet young woman. Kira's workplace was the Mall of America, where she worked at 2 different stores, Wet Seal and, most recently, Delia's. Her co-workers weren't just colleagues. They were like an extended family to Kira. She possessed a remarkable talent for identifying people's strengths, even when they couldn't see those qualities in themselves. Kira had big plans and dreams for her future, which seemed promising and bright. Tragically, all of those dreams were shattered in an instant, when she mysteriously disappeared. On Thursday, February 21, 2013, Kira had a scheduled shift at work. According to her coworkers, she seemed to be in good spirits and had plans to enjoy a nice dinner with her husband after her shift ended. Kira was married to Jeffrey Trevino, and their relationship had begun 3 years earlier. They had an immediate connection, which blossomed into a romantic partnership and eventually led to marriage. By all accounts, Kira and Jeffrey appeared to be a happy and stable married couple. While every couple has their occasional disagreements, they seem to keep their issues within the confines of their own relationship. Neither their relatives, friends, nor coworkers had any inkling of the troubles brewing beneath the surface. Fast forward 2 days later, on February 23rd, Kira, a woman known for her punctuality and strict adherence to schedules, didn't show up for work. Her concerned coworkers immediately took notice, since this behavior was highly unusual for her. They contacted Jeffrey, Kira's husband, but he was clueless about her whereabouts. According to Jeffrey, Kira had left their home the previous morning and hadn't returned. Interestingly, Jeffrey wasn't overly alarmed by this, because Kira had a habit of occasionally disappearing for a day or two. She would either stay at a friend's place or visit relatives without giving prior notice. However, one factor that raised concerns was the harsh weather that day, with heavy snowfall. Jeffrey speculated that something might have happened to Kira on her way, like her car getting stuck or her phone losing power, with no news from Kira. By the end of the day, Jeffrey decided to take action. He filled a missing persons report and reached out to Kira's family, who were equally shocked and devastated by her mysterious disappearance. Detectives immediately sprang into action upon receiving the missing persons report for Kira Stega. Typically, such investigations commence with questioning the spouse and searching the immediate vicinity, and this case was no exception. Detectives paid a visit to Jeffrey's home to speak with him. According to Jeffrey, on the day before her disappearance, he and Kira had spent some quality time together. They had dinner, engaged in conversation, played a game of bowling, and then left the mall. Jeffrey recounted that they returned home and Kira had plans to watch a movie. The following day, Friday at around 8:30 a.m., Kira had left for work, that there was an event scheduled and her presence was mandatory. Jeffrey noted that her behavior appeared normal and he didn't notice anything unusual or alarming. Jeffrey also mentioned that Kira's occasional disappearances weren't entirely surprising to him, even though he often didn't know where she went or who she spent time with. He revealed that their relationship had been facing difficulties for a few months. The mysterious circumstances surrounding Kira's disappearance have left everyone puzzled, and detectives were determined to unravel the truth behind this perplexing case. The detective began to question Jeffrey about where his wife Kira might be staying, or if she had a lover. However, Jeffrey rejected this suggestion, as he had personally asked Kira about it and received a negative response. He expressed his love and trust for his wife. The investigators collected information about Kira and her car and shared it with the on-duty patrols. They themselves went to the Mall of America, a massive shopping mall in Bloomington. This mall has 520 stores, theme parks, an oceanarium, movie theaters, a golf course, and more. It's equipped with many security cameras. The detectives reviewed the footage to check the credibility of Jeffrey's account. It showed nothing unusual. Jeffrey and Kira met after her work, spent time at the mall, then headed to the parking lot and left together. There were no signs of arguments, and the evening seemed to have gone smoothly, but as time passed with no news about Kira, the anxiety among her loved ones grew. They had no information about her whereabouts, and the situation was becoming increasingly distressing. Kira's family decided to take matters into their own hands. They traveled to Bloomington to assist with the investigation. They created flyers with Kira's pictures, posted them on poles, and distributed them to people on the street. Their goal was to draw as much attention as possible to the search for Kira. In this intriguing part of the story, Kira's family couldn't just stand idly by. They had to take action to locate their missing loved one. While Kira's family was out distributing flyers, investigators continued their work. They interviewed people living nearby and noticed something interesting. One of the neighbors had a security camera that happened to capture footage of Kira and Jeffrey's home. The investigators requested a copy of this footage in the hopes of finding some clues. Meanwhile, they received records from a cell phone company, which revealed a new lead. Turns out that besides Jeffrey, Kira had another man in her life, Ryan Wendt. He was the manager at one of the stores where she worked, and they had a close and frequent relationship. The police discovered that Ryan was out of state during the search for Kira, heading towards Colorado. This was significant for the investigation because not only did he have a romantic involvement with Kira, but he also left the state at the same time she disappeared. It could be a mere coincidence, or there might be something more to his sudden departure. Detectives needed to get to the bottom of this. They managed to reach Ryan, and he agreed to be questioned in Colorado. During the questioning, Ryan mentioned that he last communicated with Kira while he was driving through South Dakota, exchanging text messages with her. These texts were sent shortly before Kira's disappearance. Upon examining the teaming of these text messages, detectives concluded that Kira was in contact with her new lover while she was having dinner with her husband, Jeffrey. It was becoming clear from their messages that Kira was growing distant from Jeffrey. To further confirm Ryan's alibi, investigators checked his phone records to see which cell towers he connected to and reviewed his credit card statements. It was evident that he was indeed out of state on the evening in question and had no apparent connection to Kira's disappearance. As a result, he was released from suspicion. This twist in the investigation raises questions about Kira's relationships and what role, if any, they played in her mysterious disappearance. The detectives must continue their work to uncover the truth. The timestamps on the messages showed that Kira was still texting Ryan even after she got home with her husband. However, their conversation stopped at 11:44 p.m. and since then, Kira's phone has been inactive. Meanwhile, another group of investigators was preparing to review the video footage from a surveillance camera at Kira's neighbor's house. This camera covered a wide area, but it panned too quickly, making it challenging to spot anything suspicious. Whenever something caught the investigators' attention, the camera swiftly turned the other way. In the brief moments the camera captured Jeffrey and Kira's house, Jeffrey claimed that they had dinner, went bowling, watched a movie, and then went to bed. However, when the investigators watched the video, they noticed that around 2 a.m., Kira's car backed into the yard. Due to the poor quality of the footage and the camera's constant movement, it was hard to see exactly what was happening. Shortly after, the car drove away from their house. Jeffrey explained that Kira had asked him to fill up her car with gas for her morning commute, which is why he went to the gas station. Surprisingly, his story checked out. He was indeed seen at the gas station around 3:30 in the morning. However, the detectives later discovered that, after leaving the gas station, he didn't return home but instead headed towards the highway. This turn of events raised more questions about the case. The neighbor's camera didn't capture them returning home. This might have been just a coincidence because the camera was constantly moving, so it's possible that they came back later when the camera was pointing in another direction. Upon closer examination of the footage, investigators noticed that Kira's Chevrolet left at 9:21 a.m. Unfortunately, there was no way to see who was driving the car. Things took a concerning turn when a missing person report was filed with the police on Saturday, February 23rd. Then, on Monday, February 25th, the police received a call about a suspicious vehicle near the shopping center where Kira worked. This vehicle had been parked in a multi-story parking lot for several days, catching the attention of security guards who asked for it to be towed. The tow truck driver, before towing the car, examined it and found some red smudges on the trunk lid that looked suspicious. He promptly called the police. The vehicle turned out to be Kira's white Chevy. While there wasn't a significant amount of blood, there were a few small stains which raised serious concerns. Inside Kira's purse, which was found in the abandoned car, were divorce court forms that seemed to have been downloaded from the internet. Additionally, investigators noticed something unusual behind the car in the snow: a rolled-up trunk mat with dark stains on the reverse side. The discovery of these items only deepened the mystery surrounding Kira's disappearance. DNA testing revealed that it was Kira Steger's blood. Sadly, investigators began to suspect that Kira was no longer alive. This was devastating for her family and friends, as it dashed their hopes of ever seeing Kira again. It left them with a multitude of questions. How did she meet her fate? Did she endure suffering, and who could have had such a strong motive to take her life? The fact that Kira's body was missing only added to their anguish, making it much harder to come to terms with the tragedy. The detectives shifted their focus to identifying the individual who had left the car in the parking lot. The car left her house at 9:21 a.m. About 20 minutes later, a security camera at the mall captured it. Although there were no cameras in the parking lot where the car was found, there was one aimed at the path leading to the car. Upon reviewing the footage from that camera, detectives noticed a man wearing a hood that covered his head. Given the cold weather, this didn't seem unusual. However, detectives were keen to track his movements. The hooded man crossed the street and walked to a taxi stand, where he had a brief conversation with one of the drivers. He then entered the taxi and drove away. Police were able to determine which taxi company the cabs in the mall's parking lot belonged to. Using the time of the hooded man's interaction with the driver, they easily identified the cab's license plate number. All the cabs had GPS tracking devices, which showed that the hooded man ended his trip just a block away from Kira and Jeffrey's house. He paid in cash and left the neighborhood. The cab's route was captured on the same camera that had partially recorded Kira and Jeffrey's home. In just 2 minutes, a person wearing a hood entered the scene. The video quality wasn't great, so it was hard to see their face, but what stood out was the white symbol on their hoodie. As investigators continued watching, this hooded figure went into the house where Kira and Jeffrey lived. Kira had gone missing, which strongly suggested that this person was Jeffrey. With a search warrant in hand, law enforcement officers went to the house. At first glance, it appeared to be an ordinary, unremarkable home. However, upon closer inspection, forensic experts started discovering dark red stains in the bedroom that belonged to the couple. There were a few stains on the wall next to the bed, and around 100 of them on the mattress. It was clear that the bedroom had been recently cleaned and rearranged. When the forensics team used a special chemical called luminol, the carpet on the floor lit up, revealing many blood stains that couldn't be seen with the naked eye. These stains led from the bedroom to other parts of the house. Forensic analysis confirmed that this blood belonged to Kira, strongly suggesting that she was no longer alive. Apart from searching inside the house, the police also inspected Jeffrey's car. There was no blood in the car, and they didn't find any signs of a struggle. However, they did find something interesting: a gas station receipt in Jeffrey's car. This receipt was issued an hour and 40 minutes before Kira's car was found in a mall parking lot. Based on this receipt, they learned that the purchase was made with Jeffrey's card. Detectives then went to the gas station to review security footage, which showed Jeffrey filling up his car and making a cash withdrawal from an ATM inside the station. This footage provided a glimpse of Jeffrey's face and revealed that he had a logo on his jacket in the chest area that appeared to match the one on the hooded person from the earlier video. In light of this recording and all the evidence discovered at the house, the authorities took 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino into custody for questioning, making him the primary and sole suspect in the case. Upon arriving at the police station, Jeffrey promptly contacted his lawyer, who advised him to exercise his right to remain silent. The police had gathered enough evidence to press charges, but the most incriminating proof of his involvement would be the discovery of Kira's body. There was little doubt among investigators and Kira's family that she had lost her life. Over the course of several months, the police, along with Kira's family and volunteers, conducted an extensive search for her. As the snow began to melt in late March, volunteers stumbled upon an unusual bag along the roadside near Keller Lake, which was a few miles from Trevino's residence. They promptly alerted the authorities. Inside the bag were items stained with blood, a pillow, a shirt, and a bra. Forensic analysis confirmed that these items were linked to Kira, as her DNA was found on them. The search around Keller Lake was complicated by the lingering ice, which hindered diving efforts. Despite their best efforts, divers were unable to locate any remains in the lake. The surrounding area was meticulously combed multiple times, with the assistance of 4 search dogs trained to locate bodies. About 2.5 months after Kira's disappearance, in May 2013, the St. Paul Police Department received a troubling call. A concerned citizen reported a discovery in the Mississippi River that appeared to be a lifeless body. When the police retrieved the body, they confirmed it was Kira Steger. She had suffered severe injuries to her forehead and a broken finger on her left hand. Due to the advanced state of decomposition, the exact cause of her death could not be determined. With this new evidence, investigators began piecing together the events leading up to Kira's death and the aftermath. They suspected that upon returning home, Jeffrey, Kira's husband, had become aware of her texting someone else. When Kira refused to show him the messages, Jeffrey forcefully took her phone and broke her finger upon discovering the romantic messages. His anger escalated, leading to a tragic outcome as he took Kira's life and attempted to cover up the crime. Jeffrey used Kira's car to transport her body to the river, stopping at a gas station along the way. He then returned home, disposing of Kira's belongings, including her pillow and clothes. The following morning, he withdrew cash from an ATM, knowing he would need it to pay for a cab after leaving Kira's car in a mall parking lot. His plan was to make it seem like Kira had left on her own that morning, but surveillance cameras ultimately exposed his deception. In October 2013, a jury found 39-year-old Jeffrey Trevino guilty of a crime. They agreed with his defense that his actions were not premeditated, and that the incident resulted from a heated and sudden argument following the discovery of his wife's unfaithfulness. Before the judge announced the sentence, members of Kira's family had their say. Kira's sister Carrie Instager expressed her feelings, calling Trevino a calculated criminal and saying he didn't deserve any mercy. Marcy, Kira's mother, mentioned that Trevino had shown her daughter no kindness. She said, "He discarded my daughter like she was worthless, into one of the most polluted bodies of water in the nation." Jay, Kira's father, also spoke, saying that no matter what punishment Trevino received, it could never compensate for the pain he had caused their family. He emphasized that no amount of time in prison would ever be enough, saying, "However long you give Mr. Trevino, it will never be sufficient." In November 2013, Jeffrey Trevino was sentenced to 27.5 years in prison. He would become eligible for parole in 2031. Still with me? Good, that means you're ready for the rest. Don't forget to hit subscribe if you want more cases just like this one. In 2016, in the city of Mendoza, Argentina, on January 10th, two young women, 21-year-old Marina Menargo and 22-year-old Maria Jose Coney, set out on a much-anticipated journey. This journey soon turned into a significant investigation in Latin America. Maria Jose Coney was studying economics at the National University of Cuyo, while Marina Menarzo was studying speech therapy at Aconcagua University. Both were actively involved as volunteers, helping people who were struggling to find a place to live. Friends and acquaintances often described them as cheerful and deeply connected to their families. The two friends embarked on this trip with two others, but eventually went their separate ways. They started their journey on January 10th, and their route could be traced through Maria Jose Coney's Instagram posts until January 13th. The girls were already in a place called Equit January 23rd, and their journey was coming to an end. Their Instagram posts hinted at their travel adventures and seemed like a farewell as they prepared to return to Argentina. Maria Jose Coney and Marina Menarzo still had about 10 days of vacation left, so they decided to extend their stay and headed back to Montanita, marking the beginning of their Ecuadorian experience. On February 22nd, Maria shared a photo with Marina, and this would be the last post on her Instagram account. Around the same time, they contacted their families in Argentina, informing them of their plans to return. They were supposed to take a bus from Ecuador to Lima in Peru, spend a night at a friend's place, and then fly from Lima to Santiago, the capital of Chile, on February 25th. From Santiago, they would take a bus to their hometown Mendoza in Argentina. During this time, the girls informed their families that they might be difficult to reach due to poor phone signal. However, as days passed, their families grew increasingly anxious. There was no activity on Maria and Marina's social media accounts, and the families were unable to contact them. Marina's sister was the first to draw attention to their disappearance on social media, sharing a photo of the two girls and pleading for information regarding their whereabouts. Worried and desperate for answers, the families tried to ascertain if the girls had left the country and boarded their flight. Yet their attempts to obtain information from the airline representatives proved futile. The friends with whom they were supposed to stay before their departure also confirmed that the girls never showed up. Consequently, the families took the distressing step of contacting emergency services in Ecuador to report the disappearance. They also reached out to the Argentine consulate seeking assistance. The consulate stepped in on February 27. Argentine authorities sent the fingerprints of both girls to Ecuador. This action was prompted by a discovery a few days earlier. On February 25th, an unknown woman's body was found in Montanita and transported to Gil. By comparing the fingerprints obtained from the Argentine police with those of the unidentified body, they confirmed it was Maria Jose Con. On Saturday, February 27th, after examining the area where Maria's body was found, the police discovered Marina Manazzo's body. It was just 43 yards away from Maria's body. Both bodies were wrapped in plastic bags and secured with duct tape. According to Ecuadorian police information, Marina's body was harder to find initially, because the criminal tried to conceal it by placing something on top of it. During the autopsy, the medical expert determined that Maria Jose Con died from head injuries caused by blunt force trauma. She had injuries described in a certain way by the Ecuadorian authorities, along with a broken femur and toe. Marks on Maria's wrists indicated she was tied up. Marina Manazzo died from 6 stab wounds to the neck and had similar wrist marks, suggesting she was also tied up. The report stated the girls passed away on February 23rd. Toxicological analysis revealed a significant amount of a drug used in psychiatric treatment in their blood. Given the circumstances of their death, the police concluded the girls did not voluntarily consume this drug, and they might not have been aware they had taken it. This suggested someone might have mixed it into their food or drinks. Just 24 hours after finding the second body, a significant development occurred in this case. However, it stirred mixed reactions among the girls' families. Ecuador's president and interior minister announced that the police had solved the case. They arrested 33-year-old Alberto Segundo Minapont and 39-year-old Aurelio Eduardo Rodriguez, who confessed and provided details of how the events unfolded. Bloodstains were found in one of the accused, Minapont's, house. Marina's mobile phone, backpack, and other items were discovered nearby. Besides the swift arrests, what surprised many was the immediate confession of the two men. This news caused a stir among those following the case. The men presented their version of events. Ecuador's interior minister, Jose Serrano, stated that the girls left the hotel where they had a room on February 22nd at 2 p.m. Allegedly, someone stole all their money at the hotel, so they planned to hitchhike to Lima. However, this version was disputed by the hotel owner, who claimed that no theft occurred. Maria and Marina's families also doubted this story, as the girls had credit cards with them. Even with a financial crisis, they could have used the cards. Yet there was no activity on the cards. It remains uncertain whether someone actually stole all the money from Maria and Marina. Further unfolding events might shed light on this mystery. The minister mentioned the statements of people who, I'd like to remind you, confessed their actions fully. Pont, one of the suspects, informed that around 8 p.m., Rodriguez informed him about 2 Argentinian girls at a bar. They all engaged in a conversation. In this conversation, Marina and Maria mentioned they were trying to reach Lima through hitchhiking, as they didn't have enough money for a bus. However, this version raises doubts. The girls had already purchased plane tickets from Lima to Santiago in Chile for February 25th. It doesn't make sense for them to hitchhike more than 1,000 miles, risking missing their flight. As mentioned earlier, their flight was scheduled for February 25th, and this conversation, according to Pawn, occurred on the evening of February 22nd. Sounds suspicious, doesn't it? On the other hand, witnesses found by the local police confirmed these peculiar accounts. Since it was getting late and the girls needed a place to stay but lacked funds for a hotel or hostel, Pawn suggested they stay at his place. The girls agreed. The police found a taxi driver who verified that he drove Marina, Maria, and Pawn to Pawn's residence. The image you see displays Pawn's residence. According to information from Ecuadorian authorities, Pawn returned to the bar and began drinking with Rodriguez. Meanwhile, Marina and Maria were alone in the house. The heavily intoxicated men returned home around 2:30 a.m., but Maria and Marina were not there. The police learned that the girls went to a nearby store to buy soda. The exact type of soda remains unknown. The police also found a witness, the store's cashier, who verified this. If this account is accurate, it implies that the girls still had some cash. According to Pon's statement, when the girls returned to the house, he stayed in a room with Maria Coney, while Rodriguez was in another room with Marina Monago. Pon admitted he attempted to coerce Maria Coney, but she resisted and tried to leave the house. He then grabbed a stick and hit Maria on the head, resulting in her instantaneous death. At the same time, a scream emanated from the other room. Upon entering, Pon witnessed Rodriguez ending Marina Monago's life. Rodriguez promptly fled the premises. Afterwards, Pon began contemplating how to dispose of the bodies. He tried to eliminate all evidence in the house, securing the bodies in plastic bags and taping them up. During the afternoon, he borrowed a cart from an acquaintance and transported them to a desolate area close to the ocean, about 440 yards away from their home. Just a reminder, everything discussed here is based on the official account by Ecuadorian authorities. However, there was no explanation provided for the marks found on the girls' wrists. Additionally, the toxicological analysis revealed traces of a powerful substance in both girls' blood. Given these circumstances and the discrepancies in the case, the families of the girls began to question the Ecuadorian authorities' narrative. They believed this case might be linked to human trafficking, and the Ecuadorian authorities were concealing the truth. Marina and Maria's families had several reasons to doubt the official version. First, the girls had run out of money but didn't use their credit cards. Second, they were under the influence of drugs. Oddly, the only people who saw Maria and Marina that day were the ones confirming the authorities' account: the bar owner, a taxi driver, and a cashier who supposedly sold soda to the girls. It's worth noting that Manita, the town where this happened, had around 5,000 residents. The families couldn't fathom why the bodies were discovered 2 days apart, merely 43 yards from each other. Moreover, it struck them as strange that Maria and Marina sought help from Pon and Rodriguez. With the sizable Argentine tourist presence in Manita, it would have been more logical for the girls to approach someone from their own country for help. The brother of one of the victims mentioned seeing used syringes on the floor when the Ecuadorian police showed him the crime scene. Strangely, these syringes vanished when he inquired about them. Furthermore, these syringes were absent from the crime scene photos, and the experts who investigated the place denied their presence. According to the family, the two men were merely a facade for something larger, possibly involving human trafficking. Subsequently, the authorities arranged for a second autopsy and a new toxicological examination. It was revealed that both defendants, Pon and Rodriguez, had changed their accounts multiple times. In one version, Pon denied involvement, claiming the actual perpetrator was an illegal substance dealer of Venezuelan origin residing in the vicinity. This man was known by the pseudonym El Chamo. However, this individual vehemently denied any connection to the event and offered to undergo a polygraph test or provide a DNA sample to prove his innocence. Several DNA samples were found at the crime scene, including DNA from Pon, DNA from the deceased girls, and several unidentified samples. These unidentified samples didn't match Rodriguez, the alleged second perpetrator, or El Chamo, who had been ruled out as a suspect after undergoing all the DNA tests. After the second autopsy conducted by Argentine experts, it was evident that both girls were in such a state that they couldn't defend themselves before their demise. Tragically, they had been forced into distressing circumstances. The autopsy also revealed other distressing details. Maria Jose had bruises and scratches on one side of her body, as if she had been thrown out of a moving vehicle. New test results again showed that both girls had taken a strong medicine used for mental health treatment. This drug suppresses a person's control over their actions. The events that unfolded after this sent shockwaves throughout Latin America. Unfortunately, as often happens, people blamed the girls for what happened. Not just regular internet users, but even some well-known public figures held them accountable. One of those who thought the girls were at fault was Ecuador's Deputy Minister of Tourism, Maria Cristina Rodera. Around the same time the news broke about Maria and Marina's passing, Berlin was hosting a tourism fair. During an interview with a German news agency, Rothera suggested that due to the way the girls traveled, something unfortunate was bound to happen sooner or later. She also mentioned she had never been to Manita, implying it was below her social status. This was essentially blaming the victims at a governmental level, a profoundly distressing occurrence. After facing severe backlash for her comments, the Ecuadorian government apologized to Maria and Marina's families and fired Rothera. Among the most criticized was Argentine psychiatrist Hugo Narton, who labeled the girls as easy targets, insinuating that such individuals influence others to commit harmful acts. After immense criticism, the doctor stated that people had misunderstood him and he never excused criminals from accountability. In response to the countless comments online blaming the girls, a student from Paraguay, Guadalupe Osta, wrote a Facebook post on behalf of Maria and Marina. The post went viral, receiving 700,000 shares in its first week. The court proceedings kicked off on August 8, 2016, facing numerous setbacks in the case. The prosecutor changed 3 times, causing significant delays. Evidence-wise, the prosecution presented witness statements and over 200 pieces of physical evidence from where the incident happened. Police discovered the girls' belongings, biological fluids, and phones at the scene. During the trial, Pon maintained his innocence, stating that his confession was coerced by the police. This strengthened the family's belief that the Ecuadorian authorities were hiding something. Rodriguez altered his testimony, suggesting involvement of Colombian individuals linked to banned substances in the girls' demise. Early in the trial's first week, the prosecutor voiced suspicions of other individuals' involvement, pointing to the discovery of 3 additional male DNA samples at the scene, apart from Rodriguez and Pon's DNA. Ultimately, the court sentenced both Alberto Pon and Eduardo Rodriguez to 40 years in prison, the maximum penalty per Ecuador's laws. In November 2016, Ecuadorian authorities announced the arrest of another individual whose DNA was found at the scene, 34-year-old Jose Luis Perez Castro. His defense argued that he had resided in the house weeks prior due to a dental infection. The defense contended that the DNA match was due to innocuous contact with furniture or items he had touched earlier. Castro's defense weakened when a dentist testified, revealing that Castro had sought a note about dental issues weeks after the discovery of Marina and Maria's bodies. Despite claiming dental problems during the alleged time, Castro, still denying guilt, faced social media and legal battles. Despite their skepticism, the court sentenced Jose Luis Castro, akin to Pon and Rodriguez, to 40 years in prison. The families of the girls remained doubtful about the Ecuadorian authorities' narrative. They even asserted that Argentine police officers were involved in the investigation, casting shadows on the Ecuadorian version. However, Ecuadorian police maintained their stance, continuing the search for other men whose DNA was found at the house to this day. Now we're diving into an intriguing incident from 2008 in Iowa. U.S. detectives initially thought it was a typical car accident, but they soon realized it was anything but ordinary. The police cracked the mysterious case surrounding Michelle Davis, a 41-year-old woman, all thanks to crucial CCTV footage that unveiled what truly transpired. Michelle N. Costner was born on December 15, 1966, in Iowa. Fast forward to 2008. She was living in Des Moines with 3 children, on the brink of a new chapter in her life. Michelle was almost through with her divorce proceedings, eagerly anticipating a fresh start. She had moved into a new apartment and obtained a restraining order against her husband, Randy Davis. Their family had a turbulent relationship in the years leading up to the divorce. Michelle was known as a friendly, active individual who adored adventures and motorcycles. Her workplace, a trucking company, respected her and granted her authority. On Thursday, September 11, 2008, her coworkers noticed a remarkable change in her demeanor after parting ways with her husband. It was as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. On that fateful day, Michelle left work around 4:30 p.m., having completed all her tasks and in high spirits. Shortly thereafter, 911 started receiving distressing calls about an accident on Interstate 235. Michelle's Mercury Sable was overturned, with her unconscious in the driver's seat, still strapped by her seatbelt. Tragically, paramedics couldn't save her, and Michelle Davis passed away. Initially, the police presumed it was a vehicular accident caused by Michelle losing control of her car. However, forensic experts refuted this theory the following day. They discovered a bullet wound to her head as the actual cause of death, ruling out the accident hypothesis. The investigators, unfamiliar with such cases, proceeded with sending the bullet for examination, hoping it would shed light on the criminal. As they awaited the ballistic examination results, the local authorities took measures to ensure the safety of the community. They contemplated the possibility of Michelle being a random victim, worrying that the shooter might target others. The city was put under increased patrol to mitigate potential risks and solve the case swiftly. With the realization that Michelle's demise was no accident, detectives combed the crime scene for any potential leads. Their efforts initially bore no fruit, as they found no cartridge case or other incriminating evidence. The assumption of a car accident at the outset had led to the site being cleared by traffic services, potentially erasing vital evidence. Undeterred by these challenges, the detectives persevered and turned to the footage from the traffic cameras. Modern-day CCTV cameras have been instrumental in aiding law enforcement. This case was no exception. Equipped with traffic camera recordings, the investigators meticulously examined them. Their first objective was to locate the footage from the nearest camera to the crime scene and rewind it to the moment people started alerting 911. Half an hour later, they struck gold, finding the video depicting Michelle's overturned car. The footage's quality was quite poor, resembling more of a slideshow with alternating images and intervals. Unfortunately, it only offered a few essential shots, none revealing what caused Michelle's car to overturn. This was disappointing for the investigators, as they believed they were close to a crucial clue, only to find it was a false lead. The police had no choice but to press on, reviewing other camera recordings and searching for potential eyewitnesses. Meanwhile, the investigator in charge of Michelle Davis's case visited her family to convey the grim news that her death was no accident, as initially assumed. Learning that Michelle was a victim of a crime shocked her family deeply. Michelle's mother, Patty, had passed away long before Michelle's life ended. Her father, Michael Lee Costner, now faced the loss of his second daughter. The pain of outliving one's children is the most agonizing experience for any parent. The investigator heard from Michelle's family that her life had been gradually changing. Financially, she was stable. However, they suspected that the only person who could harm Michelle was her husband, Randy Davis. The divorce was nearing finalization, and Michelle had taken a restraining order against him. Simultaneously, another detective visited the company where Michelle worked to speak with her colleagues. This is how they discovered Michelle had a close relationship with a man named Matt Jorgensen, a colleague of hers. According to Michelle's friend, the feelings between them were mutual, but they had kept it a secret due to her ongoing divorce proceedings. The police now had two potential suspects, Randy Davis and Matt Jorgensen. Attempts to contact Randy were in vain, as all calls went directly to voicemail. However, when they spoke to Matt, he cooperated fully, providing an alibi for the day of Michelle's death. He revealed details about their romantic relationship, stating they never had any disagreements or fights. Matt was devastated by Michelle's death, and his alibi checked out, removing him from the list of suspects. When the results of the ballistic examination arrived, revealing the weapon used was a .22 caliber rifle, experts deduced it was a close-range shot. Given that this happened on the interstate, the police believed the shooter was likely in another car driving alongside Michelle's. At the same time, a new suspect emerged in the case. The police received a call from the insurance company reporting that Michelle's brother, Todd, was making a claim under her life insurance. Crimes committed with the motive of obtaining life insurance payouts aren't uncommon. Could this case be one of them? Was Todd capable of taking his sister's life for financial gain? The investigator visited Todd's place to ask some questions. Todd quickly realized the police viewed him as a suspect when they started questioning where he was when Michelle passed away. He explained his activities on that day. Todd revealed that their family was struggling financially and couldn't arrange a proper funeral for Michelle. Consequently, he approached the insurance company to get funds for her funeral. The police verified Todd's whereabouts and found he was in a different part of the city when Michelle tragically lost her life. Hence, Todd was ruled out as a suspect. Yet Todd provided crucial information to the police, leading them to another potential suspect, Michelle's stepson, Josh. When Michelle married Randy, he already had a son from a previous marriage. At the time of Michelle's death, Josh, a Marine who had recently returned home from the Army, was an adult. He possessed knowledge of handling weapons, making him a suspect. The police began investigating whether Josh had motives for the crime. Simultaneously, another lead emerged when a woman reported her experience driving on Interstate 235 at the same time as Michelle's car accident. She mentioned seeing a red pickup truck, likely a Ford F-150, whose driver exhibited unusual behavior, swerving between lanes as if chasing someone. The driver was described as an adult white man wearing a baseball cap. This information sparked the interest of investigators, who delved into the footage from traffic cameras focusing on locating the red pickup truck. The footage indeed revealed a red pickup truck tailing Michelle from her workplace. However, due to the video quality, identifying the driver or the license plates was impossible. Subsequently, detectives examined footage from various cameras, confirming that the red pickup truck followed Michelle's route closely, hinting at a deliberate act. Considering the suspects, detectives honed in on Michelle's husband, Randy Davis, who owned a red pickup truck. They promptly went to Randy's residence. Although Randy was absent, his son Josh was present. As a Marine with expertise in handling weapons, he could have had access to his father's car. Josh informed the detectives that on the day of Michelle's death, he went shopping with his sister and returned home to spend the evening watching TV. He also shared details about the challenging divorce process between Michelle and his father, involving property division. In another account, Josh's dad returned home around 5:30 p.m. that day, but Josh's explanation seemed unconvincing. Moreover, this talk hinted at a potential reason for his involvement in the incident. Josh seemed upset because his stepmom wanted a share of his father's assets during their divorce. However, these were just assumptions with no concrete proof. Lack of evidence meant no arrests or charges. As Michelle's family prepared for her funeral, the police intensified their search for new leads. Their investigation led them to visit various shops and gas stations along Michelle's route from work to where she met her fate, hoping for additional surveillance footage. A store a few miles from her workplace held a crucial piece of evidence. On the fatal day in 2008, a red pickup truck registered to Randy Davis pulled into the store's parking lot around 4 p.m. The challenge was identifying who was driving, Randy or his son, Josh, who also had access to the truck. The grainy footage made it difficult to ascertain the driver's identity. The driver went into the store, but due to the poor video quality, it was impossible to tell if it was Josh or Randy. After a purchase, the person returned to the pickup and drove away. It's important to note that all of this happened at 4 p.m., half an hour before Michelle left work at 4:30 p.m. As the police delved deeper into the footage, they observed the pickup truck appearing near the store multiple times over the next 30 minutes. But the driver never got out. Conflicted with what the cameras showed and didn't match what Josh said. Josh mentioned his dad came home around 5:30 p.m. Randy, however, claimed he was home all along since 3:45 p.m. and they had cooked dinner together. This contradicted Josh's statement to the investigators, where he said he was already home when his father arrived. The alibis of the father and son were interdependent. Upon further conversation with Randy, Investigators suspected that one of them was being untruthful. To gauge Randy's reaction, the investigators revealed that Michelle's cause of death was a bullet, not injuries from a car accident. This was known only to Michelle's family, as the police had not made it public. Randy hardly reacted to this news, feigning surprise and avoiding eye contact. When asked about the last time he saw Michelle, Randy requested a lawyer, effectively ending the conversation. The investigation lacked the murder weapon and substantial evidence for an arrest, resulting in Randy's release. On September 15, 2008, for days after Michelle's passing, her family and friends gathered for her funeral. Randy was there, attempting to show his grief. He even shed tears at some point. However, the question of who was truly responsible for Michelle's death remained unanswered. The investigators were struggling for answers. Unexpectedly, the breakthrough came from Josh Davis. He walked into the police station with his lawyer, ready to provide a statement. According to Josh, when he came home from his sister's, he found his father's car parked in the driveway. As he entered the house, he saw his father holding a gun. Randy suggested he leave, revealing his sinister intentions. Josh, sensing the danger, pleaded with his father not to take irreversible actions. Despite Josh's efforts, Randy left in the car. Upon his return, he parked the car in the garage and confessed to Josh. Randy was deeply upset over Michelle's decision to divorce him and claim part of the property. Unable to cope, he took a drastic step. On September 11, 2008, Randy parked his red pickup truck outside Michelle's workplace, waiting for her to finish work. He circled the place multiple times, fearing he'd missed the right moment. This explained his presence on the store's CCTV footage several times. After Michelle finished her work, he followed her. When the time was right, he rolled down the window and shot at her, as per Josh's statement. Randy Davis was later arrested by the police based on this account. He faced serious charges for causing harm to Michelle's life. However, before the trial, Randy made a deal and pleaded guilty to a lesser charge of causing harm. Consequently, 53-year-old Randy Davis was sentenced to 50 years in prison in 2010. His admission of guilt meant there wouldn't be a trial. This caused a sense of not fully achieving justice, but there was closure. Michelle's brother, Todd Costner, expressed his feelings about the situation. He stated, "I loved Randy. He was part of my family for 17 years. I cared about him." However, he also emphasized the destruction that Davis had brought upon their family. Now we're diving into the chilling case of Patrick de la Cierda, a young man brutally murdered in his Deltona home in February 2018. The 25-year-old's death sent shockwaves through the quiet town, leaving investigators puzzled by the apparent personal nature of the crime. Despite a swift identification of the suspect, the case presented significant challenges due to the lack of direct evidence linking him to the crime scene. Patrick de la Cierda was born in June 1992 in Miami, Florida, to Max de la Cierda, a skilled construction worker, and Patricia Ronza, originally from France. Growing up in a loving and supportive family environment, Patrick excelled academically and socially. He was known for his intelligence and sociability, easily making friends wherever he went. Despite his parents' divorce during his university years, Patrick remained close to both of them, regularly visiting his mother in Deltona. After high school, Patrick decided to follow in his father's footsteps and pursue a career in construction. He worked alongside his father in Miami, where they earned a reputation as skilled professionals in the industry. Despite the geographical distance caused by his parents' divorce, the de la Cierda family remained tightly knit, maintaining regular communication and offering support whenever needed. Patrick's multicultural background, stemming from his French and Spanish roots, played a significant role in shaping his identity and experiences. It was during one of his visits to Deltona that Patrick met the love of his life, a moment he eagerly shared with his mother, illustrating the close bond he maintained with his family despite life's changes. From a young age, Patrick de la Cierda possessed a striking appearance and charmed many with his demeanor, particularly the opposite sex. However, he held steadfast to the values instilled by his family, prioritizing meaningful connections over fleeting romances. Patrick's aspirations revolved around finding true love and building a strong family, mirroring the example set by his upbringing. In June 2017, Patrick stumbled upon Jessica Devaney's profile on a popular dating website, captivated by her arresting brunette features and radiant smile. Jessica, born in Orlando in 1988, had pursued studies in banking before securing a job at a local bank branch. Their initial online exchanges quickly blossomed into lengthy phone conversations, fostering a deep bond built on mutual understanding and trust. Despite living in different parts of Florida, Patrick and Jessica eagerly arranged to meet halfway for their first date. Instantly smitten, Patrick knew he had found his soulmate in Jessica, a sentiment reciprocated by her. Despite a 4-year age gap, they both felt an undeniable connection and shared their hopes for a future together. Patrick's excitement knew no bounds as he shared news of his newfound love with his mother, expressing his desire to marry Jessica and embark on a lifelong journey together. Patrick's mother, Patricia, listened to her son's excitement and felt genuinely happy for him. However, maintaining a long-distance relationship posed challenges, limiting their time together to weekends in neutral locations, often renting hotel rooms for brief but cherished moments. Despite this, their bond remained strong as they eagerly awaited the opportunity to be together permanently. In December 2017, Patrick made a significant move to Deltona to be closer to Jessica, purchasing a home in a serene neighborhood. He meticulously renovated the house, preparing it as a cozy haven for their future together. Although Jessica couldn't immediately join him due to work commitments, they planned a housewarming party for the upcoming spring. On New Year's Eve, amidst a backdrop of dazzling fireworks in their backyard, Patrick seized the moment to propose to Jessica. With a ring he had painstakingly selected, he dropped to one knee, asking her to be his wife. Overjoyed, Jessica accepted, their shared happiness palpable in the air. Patrick confessed that finding the perfect ring had been a challenge, settling on the best available option for the proposal while ordering a custom-designed ring that he envisioned himself, a testament to his commitment to their future together. As they eagerly prepared for their wedding and housewarming celebrations, both families offered their blessings and the couple envisioned a grand affair either in Miami or France, honoring their respective backgrounds. However, their plans would soon be tragically disrupted on February 27, 2018. Max de la Cerda, Patrick's father, received an alarming call from a courier informing him that a delivery had been made to Patrick's address, but there was no response. Anxious, Max contacted Jessica, Patrick's fiancée, who had also been trying to reach him unsuccessfully. They hurried to Patrick's home, where Jessica found him lifeless in a pool of blood near the entrance. Despite Jessica's frantic call to emergency services, Patrick couldn't be revived, leaving her devastated. Amid her grief, Jessica asserted to the police that she knew who was responsible for Patrick's murder, his affluent and influential ex-boyfriend. As investigators delved into the case, they grappled with uncovering the motives behind the killing of a seemingly harmless young man with no apparent enemies. Before Patrick's tragic demise, Jessica's life was entangled with Gregory Bender, a wealthy businessman who captivated her during her student years. Despite their significant age gap, Jessica fell for Gregory's charms, lavish gifts, and getaways. However, their relationship soon turned controlling and secretive. Gregory exerted tight control over Jessica's life, monitoring her movements and interactions while revealing little about himself. Their tumultuous relationship spanned nearly a decade, during which Gregory kept Jessica at arm's length from his family and friends, dictating their interactions and delaying any prospect of a normal family life. Their bond reached a breaking point when Jessica discovered Gregory's legal wife, Diora Sanchez, during a visit to his home after his accident. Shocked and betrayed, Jessica confronted Gregory, who promised to divorce Diora and marry her. Yet, As time passed, his promises remained unfulfilled, leaving Jessica disillusioned and finally ready to sever ties with the deceitful businessman. Jessica took decisive steps to break free from Gregory's grip by meeting Patrick on a dating site. Despite Patrick's calming presence, Gregory's obsession escalated from persuasion to threats and harassment. Resorting to professional help, Gregory hacked into Jessica's account to identify Patrick and began intimidating him with demands to end the relationship. While Patrick remained unfazed, Jessica feared Gregory's unpredictable nature given his wealth, influence, and access to firearms. They sought legal protection and obtained a restraining order against Gregory, compelling him to surrender his weapons. Despite initial relief, Jessica insisted on installing CCTV cameras to monitor for any potential breaches. Their caution proved prescient when Patrick was found murdered in his own home. Suspicion naturally fell on Gregory, whose obsession with Jessica had crossed dangerous thresholds. The crime scene investigation and ensuing theories hinted at a dark and twisted web of jealousy, obsession, and deadly consequences. The tragic events of February 27, 2018 painted a chilling picture at the crime scene. Initial assessments by criminalists ruled out robbery, pointing instead to a deeply personal motive behind the murder of 25-year-old Patrick. His body bore 4 gunshot wounds, 2 in the thigh, 1 in the chest, and 2 fatal shots to the head. Additionally, signs of struggle and bruising suggested a violent altercation, possibly involving a fall from a ladder. Investigators pieced together a grim sequence of events. The perpetrator likely ambushed Patrick on the 2nd floor, firing the first shot into his thigh. As Patrick attempted to flee, he fell down the stairs where the assailant pursued and delivered the fatal shots. The murder weapon, a rare pistol, remained elusive, with only 3 shell casings recovered from the scene. The absence of the 4th casing hinted at the killer's possible souvenir. Despite Jessica's conviction about the culprit's identity, initial suspicions fell on a neighbor with whom Patrick had a recent conflict. A combat veteran grappling with mental health issues, the neighbor's wartime trauma raised concerns about his potential involvement in the heinous crime. The investigation turned its attention to the mentally unstable neighbor, a combat veteran with a history of paranoia and aggression. In December 2017, he had mistaken Patrick for a burglar and, in a fit of delusion, fired shots at him. Although no one was injured, the incident landed the neighbor in a psychiatric hospital. Upon his release, the neighbor fixated on Patrick, accusing him of espionage and threatening to expose him. Despite his vehement dislike for Patrick, the neighbor had a solid alibi during the time of the murder, supported by multiple witnesses. Further complicating the investigation, the crime scene yielded no physical evidence, no fingerprints, shoe prints, or DNA traces. The meticulous planning and execution of the murder suggested a calculated approach by the perpetrator. While suspicion pointed towards Gregory, the lack of evidence made it challenging to tie him to the crime. Police opted for a covert approach, enlisting Jessica's help to lure Gregory into a candid conversation. Jessica cooperated with the police, orchestrating a confrontation with Gregory in hopes of eliciting a confession. However, Gregory remained composed, feigning ignorance of any wrongdoing. Despite their efforts to provoke him, Gregory's demeanor didn't waver, leaving the police with no legal grounds to detain him. Meanwhile, a breakthrough came when Diora Sanchez-Bender, Gregory's wife, came forward with crucial information. She disclosed finding a peculiar notebook in her husband's office prior to the crime. The notebook contained a detailed plan of an unfamiliar house, accompanied by a cryptic algorithm of actions. Initially dismissing it, Diora's interest was piqued when she saw a news report detailing the murder at a similar house. This revelation provided a new lead for the investigation, shedding light on a potential connection between Gregory and the murder. With this information in hand, the police intensified their efforts to unravel the mystery surrounding Patrick Dyer's death. Patrick would return home and meticulously planned the murder to eliminate any traces of his involvement. The discovery of these incriminating documents provided compelling evidence linking Gregory to the crime. Subsequent forensic analysis of the discarded pages revealed fingerprints matching Gregory's, further strengthening the case against him. With this newfound evidence, the police swiftly obtained a warrant to arrest Gregory Bender for the murder of Patrick Dyra. As the investigation unfolded, it became increasingly evident that Gregory's elaborate scheme to conceal his involvement had been meticulously planned. However, his oversight in disposing of the evidence proved to be his undoing, leading to his eventual arrest and prosecution. Throughout the trial, Gregory Bender's defense team employed various tactics in an attempt to shift the blame away from their client and onto Jessica. They painted a narrative of Jessica as a scorned lover with a motive to eliminate Patrick, framing her as the instigator of the crime. However, Jessica remained steadfast in her testimony, providing detailed accounts of Gregory's manipulative behavior and the relentless harassment she and Patrick endured. She presented evidence in the form of saved screenshots of their correspondence and phone records, which corroborated her claims and undermined the defense's attempts to discredit her. Despite the defense's efforts to undermine Jessica's credibility, the prosecution built a compelling case against Gregory, leveraging the circumstantial evidence and testimonies from other witnesses. They highlighted Gregory's pattern of controlling behavior and his motive to eliminate Patrick as a perceived threat to his relationship with Jessica. As the trial progressed, tensions ran high in the courtroom, with emotions running raw as the full extent of Gregory's deception and manipulation came to light. The prosecution methodically dismantled the defense's arguments, exposing the flaws in their narrative and reinforcing Gregory's guilt beyond a reasonable doubt. In a dramatic climax, Jessica took the stand once again, delivering a powerful testimony that left no doubt as to Gregory's culpability in Patrick's murder. Her unwavering resolve and unwavering commitment to seeking justice for Patrick's senseless death resonated with the jury, further solidifying Gregory's fate. Ultimately, the jury returned with a unanimous verdict of guilty, delivering a measure of closure and justice to Patrick's grieving loved ones. Gregory Bender was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, ensuring that he would never again pose a threat to society. The trial served as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked manipulation and violence, underscoring the importance of holding perpetrators accountable for their actions. Though Patrick's life was tragically cut short, his memory would live on as a symbol of resilience and the enduring quest for justice. The defense's arguments were crafted to cast doubt on Jessica's credibility and shift the focus away from Gregory's culpability. They contended that Jessica's actions, such as registering on a dating site while still in a relationship with Gregory, provoked his jealousy and anger, suggesting that her behavior instigated the tragic chain of events. Furthermore, they painted Jessica as materialistic, insinuating that she was motivated by financial gain and luxury rather than genuine affection. Regarding the evidence presented by the prosecution, the defense dismissed the murder plan found in Gregory's possession as nothing more than the fantasies of a wounded man seeking revenge. They argued that Gregory had not acted on these plans and therefore could not be held responsible for Patrick's murder. Additionally, they challenged the legality of the search conducted at Gregory's house, claiming it was riddled with procedural violations and insinuated that evidence may have been tampered with or planted. The absence of the murder weapon and the reliance on Jessica's identification of the gun model from a picture were also points of contention for the defense. They argued that Jessica's knowledge of firearms was insufficient to make a reliable identification, suggesting that she may have been mistaken. Furthermore, they emphasized the lack of forensic evidence tying Gregory to the crime scene, further undermining the prosecution's case. During the trial, Gregory's ex-wife, Diora Sanchez, was called as a witness. Her testimony provided insights into Gregory's character and behavior, shedding light on his manipulative tendencies and controlling nature. While her testimony added depth to the prosecution's case, the defense attempted to discredit her credibility, portraying her as biased and unreliable. In the end, after weighing the evidence and arguments presented by both sides, the jury deliberated and reached a final judgment. Despite the defense's efforts to cast doubt on the prosecution's case, The overwhelming evidence against Gregory ultimately led to his conviction. The court's decision to hold Gregory accountable for his heinous actions brought a sense of closure to Patrick's loved ones and served as a testament to the pursuit of justice in the face of adversity. After the unexpected confession of love from Gregory Bender during the trial, his ex-wife's testimony became muddled and less incriminating. She appeared to waver in her resolve to testify against him, citing forgetfulness and expressing doubts about his capacity for murder. Despite the defense's efforts to capitalize on these inconsistencies and challenge the legality of the search of Bender's home, the jury ultimately reached a verdict of guilty for first-degree murder after hours of deliberation. Gregory Bender received a life sentence without the possibility of parole, a judgment that brought some closure to Patrick's loved ones. However, during the sentencing, Bender's intense glare towards Jessica, the victim's fiancée, caused her considerable distress, triggering a panic attack. Sitting beside Patrick's grieving mother, Jessica found solace in their shared sorrow, clinging to the memories of her beloved fiancé. Despite numerous appeals by Bender and his high-powered legal team, all attempts to overturn the verdict were unsuccessful. The widespread public outrage over the case, fueled by the stark contrast between a wealthy businessman's actions and his victim's humble life, contributed to the swift and decisive judgment. The media extensively covered Patrick de la Cerda's story, highlighting the pursuit of justice in the face of privilege and power. At present, with Gregory Bender behind bars, Jessica Devaney finds solace in her memories of Patrick, wearing the ring he gave her as a symbol of their love. She remains close to Patrick's parents, who have embraced her as their own daughter, providing her with love and support during this challenging time. As the story of Patrick de la Cerda continues to resonate with audiences worldwide. A young lady went to another town for her education and stayed with a friend. What unfolded afterwards seemed like a complex story from a detective movie rather than a real-life event. This story troubled law enforcement for quite some time until the surprising truth was revealed. Jenny Anderson was born on July 15, 1985. In the quaint town of Fairview, Arizona. She was a lively and friendly person, always the center of attention at gatherings. In her school years, she was an active member of the local sports team. Upon finishing high school, Jenny joined West Arizona State University, focusing on psychology and crime studies. While studying, she also worked part-time at an educational center for kids. During her time at the university, she met a guy named Mark Thompson. They dated for a few years, and just before graduating in 2006, they got engaged. Jenny, at the age of 21, made a decision to pursue a master's degree in psychology, leading her to temporarily move to Phoenix for further studies. Her time at the Children's Educational Center ignited a passion for this field, and she aimed to specialize as a child psychologist. In the meantime, her boyfriend continued his studies in a different state with the goal of getting a law degree. Even with the distance, they stayed in touch every day and began preparing for their upcoming wedding, which was just a few months away. When she moved to Knoxville for her studies, Jonah arranged her own place to stay. However, in the first few weeks, she stayed at her friend Jason's apartment. They had been classmates with her boyfriend at the university. After they graduated, Jason moved to Knoxville. He had a 2-bedroom apartment and was kind enough to let her stay until she found her own place. Jonah found 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and another at a children's hospital. On the evening of December 5th, after finishing work at the store, she went to the shopping center to buy Christmas gifts. When she got back home, she packed gifts for the children at the educational center, had a chat with her apartment neighbor, and then went to her room. Later that night, after chatting with her boyfriend on the phone and going to sleep around 4 a.m., Jason woke up to a woman's scream. He thought Jonah had a nightmare and rushed to her room. At that moment, a man came out of the room, and Jason noticed a knife in his hand. The assailant immediately attacked him, delivering several blows. Jason fought back and managed to push the attacker away, allowing him to escape from the apartment. Jason hurriedly rushed to the nearby apartment complex, desperately knocking on every door, hoping that someone would call for help. However, nobody answered. He then sprinted to the closest 24-hour store, almost a kilometer away. The store clerk, shocked to see him covered in blood, immediately dialed 911. Jason quickly explained what had transpired. The police soon arrived at his residence and found Jonah on the floor, barely responsive, near the corridor door connecting 5 apartments. Paramedics prepared to transport her to the hospital. A police officer inquired if the assailant was still in the apartment, and Jason thought he noticed a slight nod from Jonah. The officers conducted a thorough search but couldn't find the attacker. Jonah was swiftly taken to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's efforts, they couldn't save her. Medical experts revealed she had suffered over 20 injuries from a sharp object, leaving little chance of survival. The assailant had also attacked her neighbor, inflicting 8 wounds, with 1 being severe. Luckily, the neighbor's life wasn't in danger. Meanwhile, detectives started examining the crime scene. Bloodstains in the corridor suggested Jonah had tried to seek help from her neighbors, but none had opened their doors. Next to Jonah's room, investigators discovered the weapon, a kitchen knife that belonged to Jason. The assailant had struck with such force that the blade had bent. Additionally, blood traces were found near the back door and on the staircase, indicating the assailant's escape route. Given that Jason and Jonah had exited through the front door, detectives concluded that the assailant had fled through the back door. Another clue emerged in Jason's room, a partial footprint that the perpetrator might have left while following Jason and launching the attack. Given the brutality of the incident involving the young woman, the police suspected that the crime might have a personal motive. They started by closely examining Jonah's fiancée, even though he was far away from Knoxville. Everyone close to the couple affirmed their strong relationship, making it difficult to find a motive for him to commit such a terrible act. The fiancée, who was around 1,000 kilometers away, learned about Jonah's tragic end when her mother called him at 10 a.m. Upon hearing the news, he fainted and took a while to regain composure. He needed help from his neighbor to book a flight and pack his bags because he was too distraught to do it himself. The detectives carefully reviewed his alibi and found it credible. He couldn't have physically traveled to Knoxville and back by the morning. Thus, he was ruled out as a suspect, shifting the focus to Jana's neighbor. Unlike the fiancé, the neighbor couldn't provide an alibi. He was present in the same apartment and had the opportunity to commit the crime. Suspicion also arose from the victim's friends and family, with some considering him the likely perpetrator. Others accused him of leaving the apartment, abandoning the young woman. This led the victim's parents to not want him at her funeral. As soon as Jason was released from the hospital, the detectives began questioning him. He recounted the events as follows. He woke up to a scream, saw an unknown man, and was attacked when he managed to push the assailant away. Jason then hurried to the front door and ran outside, attempting to reach the neighbors, believing that Jana had also managed to escape since he no longer heard her screams. However, the police were uncertain about this account. In the beginning, suspicions arose regarding Jason, mainly due to the injuries he had. 7 of his wounds were not severe, and the last one on his right hand could have happened during a struggle, either defending himself or attacking. The experts who study evidence couldn't find signs of someone breaking into the apartment. This suggested that the intruder might have been inside already. Jason mentioned that he took the trash out through the back door that evening but couldn't recall if he had locked it. The detectives asked him a lot about the door he used to leave the building. He said it was the front door, but the police doubted his honesty. If he had gone out through the back door, it could explain the blood near that door on the stairs, implicating him more. Besides, Jason was accused of illegal drug use and distribution, and being aggressive when denied drugs. He denied these accusations, but the investigators kept confronting him. After hours of questioning at the police station, the detectives proposed a polygraph test, and Jason agreed. A specialist conducted the test and indicated that Jason might not have been entirely truthful. This distressed Jason, and he strongly proclaimed his innocence, fearing for his life as he believed the real criminal was still out there. However, the detectives weren't convinced. They couldn't arrest Jason for the crime because there wasn't enough evidence against him. They needed to wait for the forensic experts to complete their examination of the few pieces of evidence found in the apartment. Then, an unexpected twist in the story happened. On the knife believed to be the murder weapon, they discovered 3 DNA samples. The young woman who had passed away, Jason, and an unknown male. Shockingly, the unknown male's DNA was also found in Jonah's room on the back door handle, and on the staircase the intruder used to escape. Furthermore, a fingerprint covered in the victim's blood was found on the knife handle, and it did not match Jason's fingerprint. The police started having doubts about him being the person involved in the incident. The proof indicated that another individual was present at the apartment that night. However, when they checked the DNA against known records, they found no matches. Even though the detectives stopped considering Jason as the suspect, the public still believed he was guilty. People accused him of leaving his girlfriend and not protecting her. On top of that, Jason began struggling with post-traumatic stress. Soon, an interesting revelation came to light. The person handling the lie detector misunderstood the machine's readings. In reality, there were no signs indicating that Jason was being deceptive. Moreover, there was no concrete evidence linking him to illegal substances. The accusations were a tactic to pressure him. What's crucial is that the severity of Jason's injuries was initially downplayed by the police. In truth, he had suffered severe harm, making full recovery unlikely. Due to these police reports, the insurance company covered only a fraction of his medical expenses. This left Jason in significant financial trouble after he was no longer a suspect. Once Jason was no longer a suspect, the police questioned him as a witness. Based on his account, they created a rough description of the attacker. It was complicated because the room was dark, and Jason couldn't clearly see the attacker's face. The attacker immediately assaulted him as he left the room. Detectives found something interesting in Jonah's room: a cap and scattered discs near the back staircase. Initially, they thought these items belonged to Jonah or Jason. However, Jason denied it. According to him, none of those things were in his apartment, implying that the perpetrator left them behind. The investigators shared an approximate description of the suspect with the media. This led to numerous potential leads as people provided information about acquaintances who remotely resembled the description. Detectives followed up on each lead, and one of them seemed particularly intriguing to a detective. They got a tip that around the time Jonah faced a terrible fate, a gang of young people known for illegal house entries, particularly theft, was active nearby. One of them, a 19-year-old named Michael Perkoff, had a resemblance to the suspect description. The police initiated a search for him. It wasn't simple, given Michael was already wanted for theft. But now, being suspected in connection to the tragic incident, the search intensified, involving dozens of officers. Eventually they located him and brought him in for questioning. The investigators quickly noticed something about Michael's shoes. The pattern on the soles looked similar to the footprint found at the crime scene, left by the assailant. They gathered DNA samples and fingerprints from him, sending them off to the experts. During the interrogation, Michael surprisingly confessed that he and a friend indeed broke into Jonah's place that night. According to him, their aim was theft, but his friend turned violent, attacking Jonah with a knife. However, the detectives found inconsistencies in Michael's account. The provided details didn't match the actual evidence, and there were no signs of two outsiders at the crime spot. Further lab results deepened their doubts. Michael's DNA, fingerprints, and shoe soles didn't match the evidence at the murder site. It became evident that Michael was lying. Oddly, such situations happen frequently. In many high-profile cases, individuals wrongly claim guilt, some seeking attention, and others hoping for rewards or recognition. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was proven false. Since then, investigators have interviewed over 1,000 potential suspects, and gathered about 400 DNA samples. However, they haven't found a match yet. In the early stages of the investigation, a reward was offered for any information leading to the case's resolution. Over time, the reward increased, reaching $60,000 by December 2005, 1 year after the tragic incident. The governor of the state contributed $20,000 of his own money, grabbing more public attention. Even with many leads, none of them led to solving the case. It stayed unsolved for a long time. In 2007, the parents of the victim decided to push for changes in the state laws. They were surprised that the person's fingerprints and genetic material were not in any databases, considering how severe the crime was. They couldn't believe this was his first crime. Later, they found out that according to Tennessee's laws, fingerprints and DNA samples were only taken from people already convicted of crimes. The parents were determined to change this. They worked on a new law that demanded the collection of these samples from anyone arrested for violent offenses. The authorities supported this, and in May 2007, the law was passed. A few months later, there was a breakthrough. The police arrested a 22-year-old named Taylor Lee Olson for breaking the rules of his parole. He had a record of theft, and during a search of his home, they found marijuana plants, leading to his rearrest. Olson had a long history of criminal activities, mostly theft, check forgery, and stealing cars. He had been arrested several times, but his fingerprints and DNA were never taken until now. Despite living with his girlfriend and their new baby, he continued committing crimes. Investigators had received a tip about his possible involvement in the crime 5 months earlier, but for some reason, they never collected his DNA for analysis. However, now that he was arrested for violating parole, they finally decided to question him about the case involving Jonah. Olson denied any involvement in the crime and agreed to provide his DNA sample. The experts received it, and the detectives soon got a report from the lab confirming that Taylor's DNA was a perfect match to the one found in the victim's apartment. Following this, his fingerprints were taken, and they also matched the marks found on the incident tool. Olson was later apprehended, and the investigators brought him in for questioning. Initially, he denied any involvement, but eventually, he chose to admit. Taylor explained that on that night, he wanted to take John's car and entered the flat through the rear entrance to get the keys. When he entered the young woman's room, she woke up and started yelling. That's when Olson grabbed a kitchen tool and caused harm multiple times. Although he stated he didn't plan to hurt anyone and it happened unintentionally, the detectives had doubts about some parts of his story. They were inclined to think that Taylor had planned the event from the start. It seemed he might have been following the person for a while. This was indirectly supported by a piece of information noted earlier in the inquiry. Jonah's friends informed the investigators that she was followed by someone in a vehicle. At that time, they couldn't find evidence to confirm it. But after Olson's arrest, they considered the possibility that he had indeed been following her. Despite the uncertainty about some details, there was no doubt about Olson's involvement. His DNA and fingerprints were found on the tool used, indicating that he caused the harm. Olson's trial was set to begin in the middle of 2008, and by then, he had already employed a legal representative. Evidently, the lawyer advised him to withdraw his earlier admission, and Taylor provided a new version of the incident to the detectives. Now he claimed that he and a friend named Noah Cox were in his apartment together. According to Olson, when he entered Jonah's room to take the car keys, she allegedly woke up, grabbed the tool, and caused harm to him multiple times. Olson rushed out of the apartment through the back entrance while his friend went into Jonah's room, where he took the tool from her and caused harm, resulting in the unfortunate event. This account also didn't convince the police. No fingerprints or DNA of other individuals were found at the scene, making the involvement of someone else unlikely. The detectives were waiting for the trial to commence, but fate had a different plan. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson took his own life in his detention cell. Notes were found beside him, addressed to his family, Jonah's relatives, and the police. In the letter to the detectives, He once again claimed that his Noah Cox was the actual person responsible and apologized to Jonas' family and his own. The detectives continued to believe that Olsen was the one behind the incident. However, they repeatedly questioned Noah, but no proof of his involvement could be discovered. Jonas' parents also believed that he was lying. In their view, if Taylor was truly innocent, he wouldn't have taken such a drastic step. It was much more likely that he simply didn't want to spend his entire life in prison. Moreover, for several months after his initial admission, Olsen continued to maintain that he acted alone and no one else was present with him. If he was trying to protect his friend, why did he suddenly change his statement and start accusing him of the incident? If you made it this far, thank you for staying with me until the end. I hope the stories gave you something to think about, or dream about. Sleep well, stay safe, and don't forget to subscribe. Good night.